Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Ayendra Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, all the previous acharyas, back to Lord Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya, then back to Lord Brahma, Lord Sri Krishna. So, today's topic was See You In Goloka Baby, the true meaning of the word surrender and death. So this topic was spontaneously decided on today, not pre-planned. This is based on the suggestion of Robin Cloud and also a few other devotees as well, Jagannath Das and some others. So we'll have a discussion here. So today is designed to be more of a discussion-based thing. So it's going to be a lot more, welcome my friend, it's going to be a lot more just talking back and forth, messages, things like that, responses, etc. So feel free, guys, to chime in anytime throughout this conversation. Welcome, Robin. Feel free to chime in, guys, anytime to discuss, to talk, because this is going to be much more, like I said, discussion-based, conversation-based, more so than presentation-based. But I'll start in, at least just initially. So, yes, this topic of surrender is a very key, important topic. Once again, another topic that is yeah, right, you're laughing at that. I thought that was pretty funny. So it's true, that's how it works. So basically, yeah, this surrender word, I noticed, is once again another one of these things that seems to be so commonly misunderstood, misinterpreted, and a lot of strange ideas people have towards this word. So the word surrender, when Krishna says this word, especially when he says this to a devotee, it has much more to do with taking shelter of and depending on him, more so than, in fact, completely so. It's not when Krishna is saying this to a devotee specifically, outside of a pastime of slaying an asura, or in a fight, when he's saying this to a devotee, so Arjuna, when he said this to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and when he says it to us as his devotees, when he says surrender unto me, he's saying take shelter of me, let me care for you, let me take care of you. It's not a military type surrender when it comes to an actual devotee. No. But it seems like many individuals have this idea, at least subconsciously, like pretty much with all of these topics we ever talk about, it's always this subconscious stuff that seems to be floating around that's causing people frustration, depression, etc. So yeah, don't look at, when Krishna says surrender, don't look at it from the perspective of like some dictatorial, tyrannical, like you bow down to me and I'm your Lord and you're my servant. That's not Krishna's consciousness when he's saying surrender to us. No. Yes, we may end up actually bowing and worshiping him and doing all this stuff, but his consciousness towards us isn't the consciousness of bow down to me and show me that you're bowing down to me and worshiping. Krishna doesn't look at it like that. Okay? We're inspired to behave like that a lot of times, especially if we're in the Aishvarya mood, but also in the devotion to Krishna mood as well, where we're simply spontaneously inspired to bow and to praise him and glorify him and things like this. But what he's saying is he's wanting to take care of us, okay? So very much so, just like your mother, specifically as a child, wants to take care of you and allow you to depend fully on her. This is Krishna's consciousness towards us when he talks about this word surrender. So on a very practical basis, on a daily basis, you have your desires, okay? You have your temporal desires and you have your eternal desires. Those desires you give to Krishna in love and affection. And you depend on him for those desires being fulfilled or not. So what that means is your mode of life, your daily activities, and the way you go about your days shift into a mindset of going about what you're doing with the consciousness of leaving the results up to Krishna in terms of what plays out, if and how your desires will be fulfilled or not, etc. And paying attention to Krishna's reciprocation with you throughout the entire process. So surrendering to Krishna means constantly thinking about him and how he is present in everyone and everything throughout the day. This is a very practical, central aspect of surrender. Also, specifically, engagement in daily Harinama Sankirtana as much as possible, and naturally doing everything else like studying scriptures, uplifting other devotees, in loving conversations, etc. So this surrender word, and this is also connected with death and our fear of death as well, or lack of it. So amongst devotees, because we know we're eternal, we know the soul is eternal, and not only knowing this, we actually experience this and can see this, like visually. It's not just believing something, it's actually you can see how you're eternal, and you can actually experience your eternality on a daily basis. So especially for anyone who's read the Bhagavatam, so this is very important. All devotees, I always emphasize this so much. Please read the full Srimad Bhagavatam, and then you will see how and in what way you're eternal. You'll understand this Svarupa, and this is why we go on and on about this all the time. Your eternal form, your eternal personality, you have to get tapped into these to overcome the fear of the pain of death. So in the cases of most devotees, since we know we're eternal, we know that we are beyond the body, we naturally are. The main thing most devotees are afraid of, who aren't yet fully pure in their consciousness yet, the main thing we're afraid of, or most devotees are afraid of, is the fear of the pain of death. Okay? The fear of the pain of taking rebirth, potentially. The fear of possibly forgetting Krishna at the time of death. All of these things together, combinedly, create the fear in the devotee's consciousness. Whereas in the materialist consciousness, or in the pseudo-spiritualist consciousness, their fear is much more based on doubt. In other words, doubting what's going to be happening. With devotees, it's not so much doubting what's going to be happening. It's basically you have a very solid assurance of what's going to be happening to you based on how your consciousness is, okay, and what choices you're making, etc. So it's almost pretty clear-cut how things are going to play out for you as a practicing devotee, and you can sort of pretty much see that kind of like as you're going about your day. So, for example, the going back to Goloka experience at the time of leaving the body, if Krishna allows that or arranges that to happen, which is highly likely if we've engaged in devotional service throughout our whole life, according to the correct process, giving love to others, Harinama Sankirtana, etc., then it's going to be that much more convenient for us to actually on our own end also remember Radha and Krishna at the time of death, much more so than otherwise. And yes, Krishna on his end is doing work to bring us back as well, but to make that more convenient and more much of a feasible transition, where it's a smooth transition, the more we do devotionally, the smoother that will be, that transition. Because what happens at the time of leaving the body is all these thoughts flood your head and your mind. Yes, Robin, I will go into that in just a second here. So basically, yeah, all the thoughts will rush into your head and your mind, all the thoughts combinedly that you've been thinking throughout your whole life, the things that you put your focus and desire on, and what your intentions have been throughout your life, and combined with the experiences you've had and what you're wanting to experience also. So it's going to be this big, huge jumble of images and stuff flooding through the mind. Now, amidst all those images, if your focus and activities and desires have been other things predominantly, aside from devotion to Krishna, Krishna will be in there, but it'll be like he'll be like mixed up with all of these other things that have been on your mind and you've been fixated on. So it's going to be that much more easy to transition on actually fully focusing on Krishna if that's already what you've been doing throughout your whole life. Because what will tend to happen is if someone has been focusing on all the other things their whole life, then they'll basically, Krishna will be there, but they're still going to be fixated on this other stuff also mixed in with their focus on Krishna. Therefore leads to other temporal bodies, other states. Maybe a demigod state, nonetheless. It may be an asura state where you're living in a much higher material status, much more comfortable, much more powerful, etc. But it's still going to be a temporal state in those cases. Now, Robin, you specifically are asking, please discuss those devotees like me. We're not 100% devotees yet. Don't 1,008% believe, and so worry about atheistic beliefs being correct. What happens if the atheists are right? That actually makes me laugh. It is a good question, though. So this question is good for individuals coming in who may have not yet be fully familiar with the Bhagavatam, which, having read and thoroughly grasped, eliminates this particular fear you're talking about. But there's many who have not done that yet. So I'm laughing because it's because it's actually a fear that is not necessary, that will go away. Yes, you have it. The fear may be there, but the fear will not be there. So first off, yes, Bhagavatam familiarity in reading this text is very important to get rid of that particular fear. Secondarily, the aspect of what I find it funny, because this is actually a very common thing. Like, it's not an uncommon thing. Many individuals coming into Krishna consciousness, year, 2, 3 years, 4 years plus in, still may have this concern and still may not 100% understand or grasp it. So the first thing, because this is one topic of this, but the first most important thing, Robin, to grasp is that this is why Krishna consciousness is based on understanding, direct experience of this eternality, and so many other things. It's not based on believing. We're never supposed to do anything on belief in Krishna consciousness. We're supposed to do it on direct understanding and experience reciprocation with Radha and Krishna in this dynamic. So overcoming the fear of death comes from experiencing your eternality. So if an individual isn't experiencing their eternality, okay, on a daily practical basis, then that peace of mind won't actually happen in the mind. You have to actually be experiencing this eternality beyond theory, beyond belief, and beyond scriptural information or logic or whatever. Now, very good example of this, a very simple way to understand this concept and this principle is that, like we discussed before, you can see and you can find where the mind stops processing information and where the intellect stops processing information. But there's information beyond the mind and intellect that is still processed and still processable beyond your brain and intellect's capacity, and every individual's brain, because the brain and intellect themselves are limited. Now, when the brain and intellect, so the brain itself will decay, basically. The intellect and the mind will continue on with the individual once the physical body is gone. And I'm saying once the physical body is completely gone. So not even just the neurons firing in the physical corpse, but when you've actually left the corpse completely, and your intelligence and your mind and your desires are still with you beyond the physical body completely, altogether. So that mind and intellect also are still the secondary subtle body. There's still a body that's still surrounding you and still not actually you either. So not only the physical body, but the subtle body is actually the body we are really supposed to intentionally slough off and transcend to be absorbed in our svarupa, our eternal form. But yes, this is the thing. You have to be experiencing this reciprocation from Radha and Krishna, from Lord Chaitanya daily, to have the fear of death gone. Okay. Now, there are many cultures in history also later on who branched off from the Vedic culture. The Celtic culture is one very well-known one who understood also that their soul is eternal. They understood that they would continue on after death and continue on living and not dying. So this is why they specifically were known, these armies, for not having fear of death in combat and actually looking forward to it, because they were guaranteed to continue on even after the physical body, and they would get honor and fame in this physical world. This is the Kshatriya consciousness in every case, and the consciousness of the Brahmanas as well, who engage in the combat activities. So to properly engage in those combative type activities, you have to be in the consciousness of understanding who you are beyond the body, at least a very solid general understanding of who you are beyond the body. It's better to have a specific grasp, but at least a generalized knowledge is good. And Balak Das, you're saying we're dying. That's enough to experience to understand we're spiritual by nature. Very good point, actually. The body itself is dying, or the externals are always changing, but the individual is still the same. So we've already died in the sense of all our cells changing and all the molecular structure of our body changing multiple times already. So that alone, we just haven't gone through the experience of completely, entirely leaving this psychophysical constructed current frame, even though the frame itself has changed, the mindset and intellect and mind body that caused this external frame to be here haven't shifted yet to another externalized mainframe, basically. And when that shift of the mainframe is what most people are afraid of, because at that point you actually do experience pain and agony and bodily anguish and all this other type of stuff. Very rarely is the passing from one body to another, or passing from the body back to transcendence, actually a peaceful experience. At the initial phases, there's always a lot of pain and anguish involved, usually. And then the peace and freedom from that, and or entering into a new state. The idea is we want to go back to Goloka in our consciousness completely. So the sooner we get there every day, the sooner we'll actually not be identifying with the body and mind. We won't be identifying with our intellect. So therefore, that much easier the transition will be, because you won't even be identifying with the externals at all in the first place. So even if the pain is there, you're so distanced from identifying with the pain, etc., that you're immersed in Goloka practically already, and then the body just gets sloughed off. The other process, which is not necessary, is basically the devotee keeps Krishna consciousness off to the side every day throughout their life, and then at the end, then they finally get really intense and surrender, and then focus on Krishna, and then all the pain is experienced in which is like a few moments and stuff like that, and then they're out of the body. But the idea is to get to that state before we actually leave the body, and that's the whole point, so that we don't waste time in that regards. Hey, welcome, Kakati Das. Yes, the cells in our bodies have died and been replaced many times. So it's all obeisances. Yes, Hare Krishna. So yeah, this is a very important point, because the cells are changing every single day already. So you have to put your consciousness in the mindset of the one that the samurai had, and the one that the Celtic warriors had, and the Druids had, etc., who even branched off from the Vedic culture. So even the cultures that didn't even remember Radha and Krishna or Goloka, most of them, the mainstream was still the soul is eternal, the personality continues on. So the fear of death wasn't really a big issue. That was very much so a later thing that was imposed with the Greek and Roman worlds, their ideas, and like Judeo-Christian traditions and stuff, who had kind of like different weird ideas of this stuff, that believe they're created beings, etc. But the European heritage and the entire Vedic heritage, even once they forgot Krishna consciousness, they still remembers that they're eternal. And that aspect of the beliefs still carried on. So we have to have this samurai consciousness, this Celtic warrior consciousness of, yes, I'm leaving this body at every moment. My body's already changed. Ultimately, the body will be slain, and I'll be purified of all my sins in the process of being slain. Now that's how a Kshatriya will think about it. If you're a different Varna, so Brahmana, Vaishya, etc., for example, Kakati Das, his natural inclination is Brahmana Varna. So his consciousness is going to be involved in performing tapasya, austerities, celibacy especially, focusing on deep like fasting and meditation, those types of consciousnesses while leaving the body or before leaving the body. And for the other Varnas, it's going to be a much more simple, depending on Krishna consciousness, which may not necessarily involve like deep meditation or anything, but just, okay, Krishna, when I leave this frame, I'll be going back to you, and keeping the mind focused in that way. So depending on the Varna also, that's going to determine how one actually goes about daily meditating on your preparation to leave the bodily state. Okay, so this is another important thing as well, and why Krishna is satisfied through the process of our Varna activities, because each of us have a different way in which we're comfortable leaving our body or our external frame. I'd personally be comfortable either way, in combat or in fasting and meditation, either method. I'd be comfortable with either or. And then for certain individuals, it varies basically. So so this process that we're so the devotees mostly, they fear the pain at the time of death, which is a legitimate thing that happens. There often is pain at the time of death. So if someone wants to avoid that, you can specifically pray to Radha and Krishna, please eliminate or minimize the pain at the time of death, so that I can more conveniently focus on you and have my consciousness focused on you. That is actually a very good thing to pray and ask for. So the thing is, what you actually want, it's important to actually pray to Radha and Krishna for that. So now, let's go into delving into this from the perspective of someone or an individual who may not specifically have full faith. And it's, well, here's the thing. Let's first go into why an individual doesn't yet have that full faith yet, and why they wouldn't yet. There's reasons for it, okay? So instead of having the mindset of like this haughty thing, okay, if you don't have the faith, you're a fool or this or that or whatever, or you're completely an illusion. None of that stuff. It's like, because the experiences with Krishna will happen when the correct understanding of the temporal's connection with Goloka is in place. Okay, and you understand how and why matter moves the way matter does, based on the activities of Goloka. The science must be understood clearly by people atheistically inclined and or agnostically inclined, etc. Because by understanding that particular science, then you can appreciate and understand the actual daily experiences, how you actually are in Goloka currently, right here and right now. That is not some future thing that you're going to obtain, etc. And like we said before, Robin, the devotees who pray, the pure devotees, are known for praying, all I want to do is serve you, Krishna, birth after birth. They don't even ask for leaving the body or actually transcending at all. So it's like, okay, good question. Why would the pure devotees be praying that specifically? Many just assume, okay, the pure devotee is praying that because he doesn't really care one way or the other whether he has to take rebirth or if he goes back to Goloka. But actually, the pure devotees pray that because they understand that they're not actually taking birth, and whatever externalized state they're put into, quote unquote, by Krishna, is just that. It's an externalized state, and they are actually with Krishna already in Goloka anyway. That's the consciousness of the pure devotee. And that's actually the fact. It's not a sentiment or just some mood thing. Okay, their mood is absorbed in devotion to Krishna, therefore they don't experience it. No, they're literally in Goloka, actually, in their continual 24/7 experience. As in, they're actually experiencing, interacting with Radha and Krishna face to face in the fields of Raja, serving them, etc., in their Svarupa, in the midst of, quote unquote, having an externalized body and walking around in the externalized world and things like that. That is why the pure devotees are able to pray like that. The ones who haven't actually tapped into their Svarupas yet, or the ones of us who are still trying to get to that point, our consciousness basically is more or less along the lines of, okay, I want to first get back to that absorption in my Svarupa first, so which is going back to Goloka. Then actually I can be in the consciousness of the birth after birth consciousness. I'll just serve you birth after birth. Right now, the whole birth after birth idea to most of us seems like a horrific idea and a horrific experience, even if it's in Krishna's devotional service, simply because we're still absorbed to various degrees in identifying with the external frame, the main frame, which is based off of the intellect and the mind. So, since you're a computer programmer, Robin, you can understand this very well. Basically, you, the Svarupa, the original living entity, you basically write a computer program, okay? And that program is what creates your externalized virtual reality experience, known as the temporal externalized body, okay? So, the same way that the virtual reality is going to be working currently, or very soon with the tech, or I should say even the way it is now, starting to work, is basically the mechanical version in this world of the hyper-mechanical, like super refined mechanics, which is actually what organics is, which causes basically absolute. So the word organic only actually applies to Goloka, to eternality, to transcendence. Organic doesn't actually apply to temporal things, simply because everything temporal is mechanical to one degree or another, no matter how refined it is. It's just because Krishna is the master mechanic, everything temporal is hyper-refined to actually be practically real because it's connected to reality, okay? But ultimately everything is yantra, mechanics, machine work in the temporal state, everything, no matter what it is, whether it's plant life, whether it's birth, death, all this other stuff. The body itself is just master mechanic work. Now, the transcendence, the actual world, the actual real organic world, is Goloka. That world can actually be referred to as actually organic, real, okay? Now, this concern of people actually, what if the atheists are right? What if we actually disappear? What if this? What if that? Well, the thing is, the whole point is that isn't the case, but even if that was the case, there's really nothing to actually worry about because you're just going to be disappeared anyway. So I mean, you go from a state, and if you're disappeared, you're not going to have your worries, your regrets, your thoughts, or your sadness, or anything else. You're just going to be gone completely. So if you're gone completely anyway, then there's nothing to be worried about or concerned about. And in this life, if that's the consciousness or doubt, you may as well engage in simple hedonism activities. Get as much sex gratification as you can, do it as much as possible, and make that the goal and focus of your life. That's the best option for someone who doubts their eternality and transcendence. And that I'm being very legitimately serious about this. I'm not just saying this as a joke. I'm saying if someone's belief is actually that there's a potential for you not existing at the end and disappearing, it's better to go about it the selfish, criminal, hedonistic sex indulgence route. It's actually the better option, and it makes more sense because there's always the possibility you could disappear, so you may as well just do things that are going to gratify your senses here and now. And that basically covers the basis. And if you get punished later, you get punished later, basically. You'll just deal with it as it comes. But the whole point is, there's mostly this agnostic thing going on right now it's even more popular than atheism. But it's an overwhelming idea for our brains to disappear. It provokes tremendous anxiety, you're mentioning. Now, here's the thing. The source of that anxiety stems from the idea, this is very important, the source of that anxiety stems from the fact that we each want to experience ever-increasing sexual pleasure, okay? And on top of that, every other branch-off pleasure that comes from that pleasure. We want to experience this to an ever-increasing degree. So therefore, the idea that we disappear and don't exist causes anxiety because the living entity is eternal. You do have those things, and the initial anxiety itself is caused by you being accustomed to having your desires fulfilled eternally, to being eternal, to continuing on beyond the body. So please understand this, my friend Robin. The very anxiety of dying comes from the fact that you're eternal and accustomed to being eternal and wanting to continue experiencing your eternality and your eternal individuality. That's what causes the anxiety. So we're anxious to lose that which we already have. That's why we're anxious. If the end was actually the end, okay, so I should say if death was actually the end of all and we disappeared, we wouldn't feel anxiety in the first place about death. No living being would. Animals wouldn't experience anxiety. Humans wouldn't experience anxiety about it. We'd all be in like this trance-like relaxed state that, okay, we're all ultimately going to disappear, and we'd actually be calm, actually, and we wouldn't be anxious about death if death was actually the end. So this is very important to remember this fact in the course of your days, that when that anxiety pops up, just know that that anxiety is because you're wanting what you already have, what you know you have eternally, and what your birthright is. So it's like the living entity desires, wants, and craves for that which you eternally have. That's why you originally desired things to begin with. So now the foolish atheists, they simply don't look far enough into things. They don't look far enough into, okay, why do we have sex desire? Because obviously, it's very obvious, sex desire goes beyond just the urge to reproduce. We're after sex for the pleasure of it, okay? And this physiological sensation of the pleasure of sex beyond reproduction and beyond its functionality in this regards. If the purpose of sex, etc., was only the functionality of reproduction, then no human being in the entire world ever would have a consciousness towards sex outside of the animal type of consciousness towards sex, which is the consciousness of, okay, we're going to engage in sex according to our instinct, according to seasonal things, according to hormonal changes only, and then that's going to be the driving force of our reproduction. And then the whole rest of the time, animals basically aren't worried or fussing around with sex because it's just an automatic physiological function that goes through their heads. But as humans, we experience a very different thing. Now, this is very interesting regarding the sex urge and sex desire. Now, Prabhupada is very explicit. This original sex urge and sex desire is the highest urge and desire in Goloka Vrindavana, and the highest, deepest experience we have there on a continual basis, which manifests when one has a human body, which is able to grasp higher principles beyond temporal life. You grasp what sex is beyond just reproduction. So you're actually able to grasp the importance of sexual pleasure, the meaning behind sexual pleasure, what it's a perverted reflection of as in the human form, and this is actually why we crave sex, because we're experiencing the millionth smidgen of our experience in Goloka, which translates as the physiological orgasm and the lead up to that orgasm in the physical, psychophysical body, okay? And that, therefore, can very much be understood to be why we're desiring this experience, and we're desiring to continually experience this and all of its branch off sensations of pleasure in the human form specifically, okay? Where we have human brains, human intellect, ability to create and think beyond animals. So humans are more anxious about the death process than animals are. The reason for this is we're more attuned to our eternal life and eternal existence beyond the body than animals are. And naturally, we're going to have this concern, because why? Because it's important to us where we are eternally, first off. And it's important because we value the presence of Radha and Krishna. We value the sex pleasure. We value face-to-face interaction, and we value our eternal individuality. Because we value these things, we don't want to lose what we value, okay? So the thought or potential of that being lost in some way, shape, or form causes all of us anxiety to various degrees on either a subconscious or a direct level. But this is the thing. Even when one knows that they're eternal, all of these subconscious things about, okay, doubting who you are eternally, doubting your full potency and full potential and full scope of your individuality eternally, all these things should also not be doubted. You must be assured of your eternal scope of influence, of potency, individuality, and uniqueness. You must be assured of these things. And this is how, here's what's very important to understand. This is how the Brahmanas are able to voluntarily give up externalized wealth and externalized things, because they're internally experiencing. Genuine Brahmanas, mind you, not fake Brahmanas who act like it for gain. Genuine Brahmanas are those absorbed more or less in their Svarupa relationship with Radha and Krishna in Goloka. And then they go about their days acting on this internal consciousness. And because they do this, they're experiencing calm of the mind, because they're experiencing the pleasure that they're eternally accustomed to. And so they understand that there's no question of loss at all in regards to anything, not even just death, but there's no loss of anything at all. So this is why they voluntarily keep themselves in a monetarily quote-unquote poverty-stricken state. Basically, as soon as you get a little bit of wealth, you basically give it off to somebody else as gifts to help them or whatever, and you immediately. So with Brahmanas, the wealth and the money is always cycling through, and they only keep what they need. They don't keep or hoard any. The other three Varnas do keep wealth and distribute it at certain times, etc. But the Brahmana Varna, their assignment is to keep cycling the wealth through, and they're able to do this conveniently because they are not worried about leaving death because of their experience of actually being connected with Krishna on a daily basis. So it's not coming from, okay, I perform these austerities, and if I do this long enough, then I'll have the experience of being with Krishna and him being with me. No, it's the other way around. It's like you experience being with Krishna on a daily basis, and that is what eliminates the anxiety. So it's very important to have the correct order of operations in regards to this understanding that, okay, you tap into Krishna, your relationship with him first, that leads to you being able to overcome matter. It's not that, okay, I chant a ton throughout the day, I chant rounds, and then by doing this will please Krishna, and by pleasing him, I'll be able to communicate with him, connect with him, or see him, or whatever. That's not how it is. It's the other way around. You do those things, experience being connected with Krishna already, real time, okay? And then that inspires you to do those things more, because then you get that much more pleasure from them, right? So you're inspired to read more, inspired to chant more, inspired to do all this because of that initial connection that's there. Now, regarding this point, like I said, when I first came to Krishna consciousness, I knew that I was eternal, so that was a given, and I felt it and experienced it on a daily basis. So at least in that regards, it was never an issue for me of just, okay, having to believe something and then it possibly not being true or whatever. It was more like, okay, I know I'm eternal, and I want to get back to that eternal experience right here and now, and beyond this bodily state, because I understood very clearly that suicide of the body I would just keep conscious, and I would stay awake and aware, with my intellect and with my mind still floating around in a ghostly form or whatever for a while, and I'd be actually more miserable than when I had the temporal body. So I was like, okay, I may as well just stay in this temporal body for a while, bit longer, and then allow Krishna to eliminate the depression and anguish and anxiety. And then sure enough, like I said, that intense prayer, that was 2 days later, I came to Krishna consciousness, read Sri Upanishad, etc. And the rest is history from there. Now, what's very important about this is the Bhagavatam really goes in depth on the whole science of this. So the science of the 5 elements, the science of which, remember, the 5 elements are the subatomic particles. If you go all the way down past the periodic table of elements themselves, you'll actually run into the original 5, what are known as the Platonic solids, the original geometric shapes, which make up matter. And those initial 5 geometric shapes originate from the 5 rasas of Goloka Vrindavana. That's why they're 5. That's why we have 5 fingers, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. And that's why the material world operates the way it does. So this is why you, being a programmer, Robin, really need to understand this side of things very well. So how numbers work, geometric shapes, sacred geometry, why the pentagram is the way it is. Once again, the 108 degrees on the pentagram come from the 108 gopis of Goloka Vrindavana. And so there's an original source reason why everything manifests temporally the way it does. And you're mentioning Kakadi Das, exactly. Kamadev, you have no business committing those wild heathenistic acts when you're as tuned in as you are. And that's the funny thing about me, it's like a lot of times I will say things or just to see if people actually see me, or if they just get distracted by what I'm saying or what externally doing or whatever. Sometimes I do that to test people to see actually. It's like, okay, am I actually focused on this stuff, or is that actual consciousness, or am I really focused on internal things, deeper things, And the ones who actually stick around longer and talk to me more, they can see that my interest really isn't so much in the hedonistic stuff, even though I get humor from it, and I often will claim that it is the case, and on my own end, I might assume that's the case, but here's the thing. Whatever our state is, it will show through our actions. So what is everybody's actions? Okay, is someone's action that they're actually constantly fixated on topics concerning Radha and Krishna all the time, amidst whatever they're doing? Or is their action that they actually get side branched and distracted with the other topics themselves and absorbed in the other topics independently of Radha and Krishna's connection to those topics? So we look at the actions. So words are just words. They're words on screens, they're things we say or type or whatever. But it's the actions that we actually perform and what we actually feel in our consciousness regarding so many things. Now, so yes, and it's funny you mentioned that, Kakadi Das, because today my deities, even her smile right now actually is starting to come back, and her be in the calm, happy, relaxed mood again. I think Radha and Krishna have been sharing your exact sentiment that you're expressing right now towards me throughout these last few weeks, especially today or whatever. They're just like, you know what? It's like it's just not necessary for you to be absorbed in these types of things when your real focus is here. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, I think that's right, because they were expressing this concerned look on their face today. Every time that happens, there's always a specific reason for it. You know what I mean? Whenever they express concern or this, what some people would call like a frustrated or sad look or something, or scared look or whatever, there's always some specific reason for it, and it's like the actual murtis, their actual deities, features will actually change in front of me. They'll actually express. Their smile will actually increase visually towards me, and then their murtis will actually smile. They'll take onto this more calm thing. You know what I'm saying? So this is the point. This is actually a good example of what we're talking about, Robin, right now. Me and Kakadi Das, we're talking about this, and all 3 of us were having this discussion. And right now, Radha and Krishna are reciprocating, and their smile, as I'm looking at their picture right now, is actually increasing in front of me. And I'm actually seeing Sri Radha's smile increase, and she's in more of a calm mood. So this is what I'm talking about. There's actual things going on, relationally, and that translate into matter. You see what I'm saying? So the point is this: the idea is that, and you're mentioning they want Nitai Kirtan. Oh yes, and they will get much more Nitai Kirtan. Believe you me, that is very much the case. And the point of this is, though, that they are with us daily. They're communicating with us and interacting with us, and experiencing their relationships with us on a daily basis. So the on a very practical level too. So this is why I like going so much into the sciencey side of things and stuff, because the periodic table of elements is the table of combined elements. So there are actually 5 elements which combine and mix together to then go up to the subatomic particle level, then to the atomic level, which is what we know as the periodic table of elements, etc., which is the periodic table of combined elements, not the periodic. So a lot of people in the modern world still have the backwards idea where it's like, okay, the periodic table of elements, the atoms and the subatomic particles are the smallest. No, it's actually been verified recently again. That when the ancients were talking about the 5 elements, they were talking about the 5 platonic solids at the core of the subatomic particles. And of course, even beyond that, you run into Radha and Krishna in Goloka directly. So, but immediately after Radha and Krishna in Goloka, on the micro level, you run into the pentagram, okay, which then spawns into the 5 platonic solids, and then the everything else that branches off materially from those core elements. Okay. Now the core elements are the combinations of what? They're the combinations of your relationship dynamic experience in Goloka with Radha and Krishna on a daily basis. And that is what causes the original 5 platonic solids to develop, and what causes that pentagram to be there in the first place. It's based on your individuality with them. Okay. So yeah, and this is, the decimal system, all this other stuff, sacred geometry, all these are very key and important sciences. And why pi, like we discussed before, is a transcendental number. Why the golden ratio is also a number beyond like material bounds, etc. It's simply because these numbers come from eternal transcendental activities and pastimes. That's why they're beyond material calculation in terms of how they operate. And even materialist scientists have to admit this. Agnostics have to admit it. Atheists also have to admit it. And they use the word transcendental number for these things also. So they can't avoid the transcendental label for these things. Now, what it comes down to is we're dealing with another situation today, which, like we discussed so many times before, which is not exactly like the mainstream atheism, but it's like the original version of what atheism was, which was Brahmavadi and Mayavadi, but more so the Brahmavadi ideology. Basically, and this is why it's so toxic, because with the Brahmavadi idea, they basically do accept that there's eternal existence, but basically it's like this back and forth. You can either end up in a state where you're not experiencing your individuality, you're merged in the light, or you can experience your interactive relationships with Radha and Krishna. But you see where that conception leads one. It still leads someone to a hopeless conception, because they still see Radha and Krishna's forms, Nityananda and Gauranga's forms. They see all their forms as simply movement vibrational aspects of the absolute, which they see ultimately still as impersonal. So really, Brahmavadi is actually not any more enlivening than atheism, than flat atheism, or all these other hopeless nihilistic ideologies. It really isn't. Oh yes, we'll definitely discuss that much more. I'll do a whole video on Nityananda actually, and the importance of Nitai's names relating to Harinama Sankirtana. So this is a very good point that you bring up, which I appreciate. And then you're saying, okay, you'll get a kick out of this comedy. Well, we have one giant skyscraper in our city is ascending in an octagonal shape, so each of the 8 sides have 10 windows. And there are 108 windows from top to bottom. The building is also blue in color, and it's called the 24/7 building. Look at that. There you go. See? So it's like these, right there, the symbolism right there is in geometry and construction and in direct encoding and direct messaging here, in just the way things are built, the way things have to be built, and structured and organized. And so it's the funny thing is too, even the big asuras know about all these principles also, so they use these concepts for their advantages as well. They're aware of the eternal world. So okay, Robin, if you're still on, this is a very important thing. So in the Bhagavatam, the 7th canto, Hiranyakashipu, the worst of the asuras, he specifically understood that he was eternal. He didn't have the consciousness of the modern foolish atheist thinking, okay, I'll disappear if I do this. No, he was able to perform his standing in one place and not worrying about his body rotting away for 125 of his years, which is 36,000 Earth years, because he knew he was eternal. So he specifically says in there, because I am eternal and time is also eternal, even if I leave my body in the performance of these austerities, which he knew he possibly could, then I'll just enter a new body. I'll keep purposely performing austerities repeatedly over and over and over every single body that I enter into. And therefore, with my power of will, I'll eventually be able to overcome Krishna, Vishnu specifically, because he was absorbed in the animosity dynamic against Krishna as Vasudeva, Krishna as God. He wasn't really dealing with Krishna of Raja or Vrindavana. He was dealing with Krishna as God, as his opponent, basically, as Vasudeva, and then as the four-armed Vishnu. So Hiranyakashipu specifically was able to perform his insane austerity and let his body actually rot away to where there was only the skeleton left. And in Satya Yuga, humans also, not only the asuras, but humans as well, are able to keep your life air floating around in your bone marrow. In this age, and in each age, basically, in the Treta Yuga, you're able to keep your life air and consciousness going as long as you have, as long as you basically have like rotting flesh still surrounding the bone or something, or like some semblance of your original body still there. In Dvapara Yuga, you have to still have your blood itself flowing, but you can actually completely transcend needing to eat food ever again, if you prefer, in Dvapara Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, where basically we can perform severe austerities for really long times, but eventually at some point we have to eat food again in that course in Kali Yuga. So in previous ages, you could actually continue on your identification with the body if you just had the skeleton left only, and you could still be walking around literally as a skeleton, and then just manifest your flesh again around your skeleton back in those previous ages. So the in the conservation of semen, this is very important. We can get pretty close to that in Kali Yuga with the conservation of semen. You can obtain all sorts of powers and stuff like that. Point being, conservation of semen alone by itself gives one mystic powers, which can temporally operate, and more sex pleasure temporally, but it won't actually transcend you from matter and to get you back to Goloka. So yeah, that's important to remember too. Semen retention has to be done for the pleasure of Radha and Krishna, for their sensual pleasure, or for their pure version sexual pleasure. And then that semen retention becomes an activity of loving service to Radha and Krishna, which actually causes them transcendental sensations when you're practicing it. Whereas if you're just doing it as an austerity, a physical tapasya, it will lead to only temporal mystical powers, which also the demons have, because a lot of the demons have performed those austerities for those reasons, and that's why they have those powers under Krishna's allowance. So yes, this is very important to remember. So Hiranyakashipu, his body was eaten away, the skeleton was left, but he was still conscious even though he just had the skeleton moving. He was fixated on the form of Krishna also, though. Here, this is very key here. So he was fixated on the form of Vishnu in anger, in devotion, but his meditation was on Krishna's form, though. And he understood that meditation means meditating on the form of Vishnu. So even the asuras of the past, the original atheists in the past simply meant you were opposed to Vishnu being the supreme ruler. It didn't mean that you doubted your eternal existence. It didn't mean that you doubted anything else like that. It just meant that you wanted to basically transmute your state of being the Jivatma into being Bhagavan yourself, and then basically reverse the process to where now you have Bhagavan under you, so you're the Para Bhagavan over Vishnu himself. That was the original Asuric idea that started with Hiranyakashipu and the other Daityas and stuff. Before Hiranyakashipu, they were actually still more devotees to Krishna. Very interesting aspect of the history, and just political enemies of the Devas mostly. And then when Kali first infected Hiranyakashipu, he was the guy that started off okay, we're going to actually oppose Vishnu and try to take him over mindset. Whereas before it was just, okay, we're devoted to Vishnu, but we're opposed to the demigods. It's basically they were political enemies, because it's like, just like nowadays in politics, if somebody rules a country or rules a bunch of cities or whatever, you might be politically opposed to another guy who's trying to rule the cities as well. You both might be devotees at the same time. It's just you're opposed to the way he's wanting to run things, and then he's opposed to the way you're wanting to run things, basically. So yeah, so basically that's how it worked with the demigods and the asuras way back in the past. And you're mentioning down here, probably, do you want to see evidence of flat Earth? Well, I already know for a fact the Earth is flat, and I've seen huge amounts of evidence for that, on top of knowing that it's flat. Yes, but any more evidence you can provide for others, that'd be absolutely wonderful. The more evidence, the merrier. So, yeah. So basically, and that, once again, that flat Earth topic, understanding that the Earth is flat and how and in what way, etc., that actually connected to freedom from the fear of death also, because now you understand the validity of the Vedas, the full scope validity of the Vedas, etc., etc. Now, on this topic, this is very interesting because the last few days I've been going through the Bhagavatam, and there seems to be somewhat of a combination of two things. There was the Sanskrit is solid and accurate, but there seems to be, in certain cases, um, two things where there's two scales of the size of the Earth, part of the Earth, Jambudvipa, but it's just not specified that, okay, there's Jambudvipa and there's a larger scale. We all know that there's the Bhumandala, which is the whole large thing, and then the small Earth part. We know that that difference is there, but I found another one that wasn't specifically specified, where Jambudvipa itself, this part that's surrounding Earth, has two segments to it. So there's the inner Jambudvipa, and then there's the outer Jambudvipa that consists of the 8 islands surrounding it. Yeah, so this is another key thing I just come across. But because it wasn't specifically specified in the Bhagavatam that, okay, there's the inner Jambudvipa and then there's the outer Jambudvipa, because they didn't use that wording, it led me on a wild goose chase in circles trying to figure out, okay, why are they listing 1 million miles across in this spot, and why are they listing 100,000 miles across for the same exact location on just the next verse over? So it's like, oh, okay, there's inner Jambudvipa and then outer Jambudvipa, just like there's different measurements for Bharatavarsha, but they don't specify, okay, this is inner Bharatavarsha, outer, and then etc. And also just because they don't specify that there's the two separate Himalayan ranges either. So this is all stuff you got to piece together with really common sense and an understanding and stuff. But then it starts to make sense. But I'm reading it over again. It seems like there were a few minor errors in translation from the Sanskrit to English, but the Bhagavatam itself, the Sanskrit version, is 100% accurate. The English over-translation, there may have been a little bit of interpretations here and there, but the point is, the evidence is there, it's enough, it's substantial. We at least know where things are located related to each other. So we know where our part of Earth is related to the other parts of Earth, etc., etc. It's just getting the exact dimensions and measurements down for everything is the challenge right now, in terms of visually being able to draw it on a map where the measurements are visually accurate, right? So yeah, that's kind of a side topic I can go into a little more a bit later, but it is connected. Yes, the Varahadev in Mathura is carrying a flat plane. Yeah, exactly. He would have been carrying the flat disc of Earth over his head, not a little ball. When it's described, he played with it like a ball. Basically, he's playing with like a ball or a frisbee. It's basically a general reference. It doesn't mean it's actually in the shape of a sphere specifically. But that is an assumption, of course, a lot of people have. Now, I know it's probably getting late for you, Robin, on your end, 52-minute mark. So I want to leave you with something a little more substantial on this. But I hope so far it's been helpful and uplifting to you, in encouraging you and not feeling so afraid of leaving the body, etc. So the thing is, Robin, you got to do this every day, my brother. You have to focus on who are you eternally? Like literally, what do you idealize as being your eternal state? And what you idealize the most, what you want the most, is what your eternal state is. That's why you want it the most. So it's like literally whatever we want the most right now, and then that will be refined as time goes on, is what your eternal state is. Okay? And then more will be revealed about that eternal state as time goes on, refinement. So pay attention to what you really desire, what you really want. That the fact that, okay, the source of your anxiety is coming from you're specifically afraid of losing all these things that you're idealizing and wanting. What I want the most, learning. There you go. So that obviously means you're in an eternal state where your major emphasis is constantly learning more and more and more and more. Okay? So even in Transcendent, even once you know everything, you're still eternally learning and gaining new experiences of what you already know. Okay? So pay attention to that. The learning part is very significant. But remember, be able to distinguish and be very attentive to the free flow of your bhakti and your devotion between your relationship with Radha and Krishna, distinguished from information about them and book learning about them. Okay? Because they are two distinct lines of experience. What often can happen in many devotees' cases is they get fixated on the book learning information side about the forms of Radha and Krishna. And this quite often, more often than not, leads to syncretic Brahmavadi ideas regarding their forms. Okay? And the reason it does this is because that focus itself is actually focusing on the jnana aspect of things, which is actually a branch off absorption of consciousness from your original consciousness. Okay? which means that you're in your original consciousness, you're understanding everything intuitively, directly, and immediately regarding their forms, beyond what you're able to put on paper or into a shastra. Okay? The things that are translatable from what you're experiencing into shastra and onto paper are within that jnana mixed with bhakti fold. Okay? Or I should say jnana used for the purpose of bhakti. All right? But make sure that in the learning, you learn according to your soul's inherent understanding of your relationship with Krishna, even beyond what you're reading on paper, as the central focus and emphasis. And then what you're reading on paper will make more sense when you do it that way, in that order of operations. So the thing is not studying the scriptures from the mindset of, okay, I'll study the scriptures, I'll learn all the information about Radha and Krishna that I can first, and then by doing that, I'll be able to invoke my relationship with them and then know about Goloka. No, it's actually the other way around. You absorb in that relationship that's already there, then you understand what's written on paper and can understand what is being talked about regarding their forms, etc. With the correct understanding, then you'll understand how and in what way their forms are actually directly interacting with you, face to face, person to person, on a daily basis, and eternally when you go back, on a very practical level too. This is not some fairyland like ideology stuff. This is or ideas, or idealism. This is actually very tangible stuff you can experience daily. Very tangible. So, and very practical too. Because the thing is, too often, devotees, they deny themselves what they really want. And they don't ask for what they really want from Radha and Krishna. And this is a grave mistake. Because normally they do this out of the justification, okay, if I want something myself, that automatically means it's mostly a material desire, or to some degree a material desire. Well, it really doesn't make much of a difference whether it is a material desire or not. The point is you have to go to the same person to have that fulfilled anyway. So if you're desiring that, then just ask Krishna to have it fulfilled, and then in the process, Krishna will do one of two things. He'll actually fulfill that desire fully, and then have you transcend to your deeper desires, or he'll fulfill both at the same time, or he will fulfill specifically the deeper desires and show you in what way how those desires are branch offs of that, and then minimize those desires. So, like, for example, Dhruva Maharaja, he still rules the planet of Dhruva Loka, which is considered even greater than the planet of Lord Brahma, which is the pole star. We all know that all the stars are revolving around it, so always stationary right there. He desired to have a kingdom greater than that of Lord Brahma, or at least equal to that of Lord Brahma. And sure enough, Krishna gave him that. And then once Krishna gave him that desire, immediately he was like, oh my gosh, he realized he actually desired intimacy with Krishna directly as his actual desire, which translated into his temporal conditioning as the desire to be the ruler of this huge planet and to have a bunch of stars revolve around his planet. Basically to be one of the most powerful gods in the entire cosmos was his initial desire, which was fulfilled. But he's like, wow, now this desire is fulfilled. I didn't really actually want this desire. I wanted something even deeper. But then Krishna fulfills both. So the point is, Dhruva Maharaja's example is perfect in this regards. It's like, don't purposefully like not ask Krishna for something just because you think it's a material desire. It's like, because you're going to keep desiring it anyway. It's like if you have a desire, you're going to keep desiring that if you really desire it, whether you ask for Krishna to fulfill it or not. But it's like if you ask Krishna to fulfill it, you'll get answers a lot faster, and it'll either be fulfilled quicker, or Krishna will educate you in a way that you can actually transcend the desire faster. But the thing is, communicate with Krishna on a daily basis, like talk with him, interact with him, like on a personal level. So don't. Here's the thing, Robin, and my friends too. Let's see here. How can we go to Dhruva Planet right now? Yeah, so a lot of all this other stuff, we can get there and stuff by, once again, like meditating on association with Dhruva Maharaja, etc., talking to him in his interactions with you can get to the planets of any of these individuals, Brahmaloka, by focusing on them also, along with your devotion to Krishna, very easily. When you leave the body and transcend. Normally it's challenging to mechanically travel, although they may allow this to happen at some point soon in the future. The holy name fulfills all desires. So yeah, Robin, interact with Krishna on a very personal level on a daily basis. Instead of like, okay, Krishna, you're way off, you're aloof, you're God, you're the supreme, you're this, you're in this position that's just vastly beyond me, and I have to get to you. Look at it like Krishna's here in front of you right now, face to face, daily, and interact with Krishna from that basis. there's no need to treat Krishna as like some just being off and aloof somewhere while you're down here. I mean, that's how the Vaikuntha-vasis think about it. That's like the Vaikuntha type thinkers. They think kind of along those lines a lot. It's like, okay, God's there and I'm here, and it's just. But we're Vrindavana devotees. So Vrindavana devotees, we interact with Krishna face to face daily. So what this means is, just like we're having conversations right now, or if I was in the same room as you talking to you, you'd be talking to Krishna like this. This is how I always talk to Krishna on a daily basis. Radha and Krishna both. And all the pure devotees I talk to like this on a daily basis. And the reason I do this is because they're my eternal friends. They're my eternal family members. We're all eternal associates in Goloka. And so I treat them as I eternally know them. And that's how I interact with you also, my friends, because you're also my eternal friends. And we also interact in Goloka this way. Now, keep in mind, we also do disagree in Goloka as well, because we maintain our individuality also. So what manifests in this material world as people blocking each other, not talking to each other again, having arguments, etc., that's also translating from the transcendental realm as well. So, we're all a traditional family, which means within families, there's loving disagreements, there's loving arguments, there's loving all this and that happens all the time, yes, exactly. There you go, Kakati Das. Krishna lives in your heart right next to the Super Soul, so just talk to him right next to you. Do we have our memories from the material world and bodies in Goloka? If you want them, yes. It all depends on if you want them or not. Some devotees, they don't want them anymore. They want to forget those things, and Krishna eliminates those. If you want to remember them, or to various degrees, Krishna can arrange that too. It's basically what you want. It's like what you actually desire. Yes, we definitely understood, Kakati. I'm sure of it. And so, Robin, like what you're saying right there is important, because it's like, okay, your memories, so like the shitty, lousy memories from the material world that you didn't like, and that you like the one traumatic memory you were talking about, that might be something you would prefer to forget. And that's what Krishna says, I'm the cause of knowledge, memory, and forgetfulness. And because Krishna controls all these things, he controls literally what reality is and is experienced as. Okay? Just like Krishna's choosing to use the 5 decimal system times 2, which is the 0 to 9, 10 decimal system based off the pentagram, based off the 5 Madhurya rasas. Krishna's choosing to use that system to run reality right now. He can change that anytime he wants and run reality differently. But we and him will always be together in reality. There's never going to be a time where, and we're balled up with Krishna's personality too, our individuality. So he's always existed, we've always existed. But the thing is, if you want memories gone, like as if they've never happened and that you don't experience it, only good memories to remain, then that's what you'll remember and see. If you want all the memories to remain for educative purposes, how they're related to your eternal rasa, etc., then you'll remember everything. You'll remember, okay, I spent like 1,000,000 years in the hellish worlds over here. I spent like 1,000,000,000 years in the heavenly planets over here. I spent, 1,000+ years on Earth like this, etc. And you'll relate that to your relationship with Krishna in Goloka and see how it applies. And you use it to your advantage in his service. So it's a very individual thing. And so this is what I always encourage devotees, because I notice there seems to be like this excess of avoiding asking for what you desire from Krishna. And that's mostly predominantly an artificial thing that people impose on their consciousness. Like, you really very much so should, and it's a very healthy idea to ask Krishna for what you want. Because the thing is, he will fulfill those desires, or he won't, but the way he will fulfill them, it will be in a way that you're interacting with him in the process. So what's actually happening is the far deeper desires being fulfilled of interacting with him, which is more pleasurable than the desires independently themselves being fulfilled anyway. Okay? So you're asking a good question. Are we simultaneously in other planets? You're simultaneously in various transcendental worlds at the same time. And there can be certain cases where an individual is in a heavenly demigod body and a human form at the same time. Things like this can happen. Usually, it's the individual is... but each of us have a form in Goloka. We each have a form in Vaikuntha. We each have a form in these other different pastimes in the transcendental world, though. Because remember, the eternal version of the pastimes, the central absorption version, is the Goloka pastimes, your highest, deepest Svarupa. The branch-off conditioned version of that which within your consciousness you have the conditioning of Krishna needing to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is your experience of life in Dvaraka and the branch off realms, Mathura, and also the Vaikunthas, Krishna in his four-armed interactive pastimes with you. Once you have that first condition on the consciousness. And then, of course, you have our externalized material forms also in the material worlds. So what if we don't know what to ask at all? Well, and that's the whole thing. The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and, of course, the names of Nitai Gauranga together are the means to actually have all your desires fulfilled anyway, even if you don't specifically ask for one thing or another, because that is all inclusive. This is another very good point too, where in the process of chanting, really do focus on what you eternally desire, because that is actually how you tap into what your Svarupa is. So check this out. It's a pretty simple exercise actually. So I'll just give a direct example how it works with me and what I have found in this regards. And then you guys can apply it in different ways. So my fixation with butts and breasts and things like this, which is a common thing that materialistically conditioned male-embodied people have, right? The way in which I'm fixated on these parts of the body, especially the rear end of females, and then the and everything related to that, basically understanding how much and why I desire this so much has given me really interesting insight into what I actually want transcendentally, and why I'm conditioned the way that I am conditioned in matter. Okay? So what's very intriguing about all of this is my obsession now, my temporal obsession with hidden knowledge, so hidden occult information on things. These words, these Sanskrit words, guha, guda, so guda is associated with the rear end, the anus, right? Physically speaking. Guha has to do with that which is actually hidden from common view. So my obsession with these two principles, these concepts, these goo things, right? Slime, goo, has a good positive correlation and also a negative temporalistically perverse connotation as well. So there's two sides to my eternal coin, basically, or my eternal transcendental existence and experience. Well, I guess that's not the best way to work, but you get the point. There's the perverted reflection and then there's the real version. But the point is, my perverted reflection is very much so significant in this regards, in terms of hidden knowledge associated with the rear, that which is forbidden, that which is considered grotesque, nasty, gross, all this other stuff. Because even in Goloka, all of those things are present as well. Stool is also present in Goloka. Obviously, rear ends are infinitely beautiful. Rear ends are present in Goloka also, naturally, and all sorts of other things are there in Goloka too. And it's kind of funny to think about, but it's a fact. It's like all this stuff's actually there also. It's not just in the material world. And also the hidden knowledge and the obsessing on hidden things is also a thing that happens in Goloka too. So all of these things take place in my eternal existence as well as my conditioned existence. And I love Goloka, absolutely. So the thing is, the point being is that whatever the to the degree in devotional service that we're enthusiastic, right? And to the degree that we're really inspired on a daily basis in our devotion, to that degree, our conditioning, which is still temporal, lustful, and not pure yet, is that much more related to our eternal state. Okay? So now you look at Prabhupada's life, what he did, how he went about things. Bhaktisiddhanta's life, how he went about things. Ayendra Prabhu's life, and how he did it. So Ayendra Prabhu, he's a great example. We know for a fact now that Ayendra Prabhu, his eternal desire was to be a manjari of Srimati Radharani, playing music for her and to Sri Krishna. And he had a very unique mood towards both of them. And check this out. That translated to the way he actually preached about Radha and Krishna during his earthly pastimes. The way he talked about their pastimes, the way he emphasized Sri Radha's beauty and glories is very much correlated with who he literally is eternally. So, the point being, what he revealed mercifully at the end of his book about his beautiful form, his female form, in the scriptures, gives us a very deep insight into who he eternally is. Now check this out. This is really trippy. That post that I posted recently about me having this dream where Ayendra Prabhu appeared, that he actually appeared. And I'm relaying this to other devotees for upliftment specifically, but also for a humorous thing. But this is a perfect example. Like in the dream, he was dressed in like this green garment. So like Little Red Riding Hood or like cloaks, right? Like Celtic cloaks. He had like a green one on, right? And the last time he appeared in my dream, he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt for the first time I'd ever seen him in those clothing, engaging in Harinama Sankirtana with me the night before I was inspired to do daily Harinama Sankirtana. This dream, he was basically preaching to a group of devotees. Okay, now this is like the night I was really fixating on Mother Yashoda's breasts and how they gush milk and stuff. Lustfully, I was thinking about how beautiful her breasts possibly could be, right? And then sure enough, that night I had this dream. He was talking in this preaching. He was like, yes, we really need to overcome all of our mundane misconceptions. And he said there's so many mundane misconceptions towards the form of Mother Yashoda, the gopis, Srimati Radharani, Krishna, and we really need to overcome these perverse, externalized ways of thinking about them. Now, I was sitting on the left side of him next to him, and I was like, he's specifically, indirectly talking exactly about me right now and how I'm like lustfully obsessing on these forms, right? For my own gratification. But here's the thing, the fact that he actually mercifully appeared in my dream and actually specifically out of love and affection indirectly mentioned that to where I would register, and I touched his shoulder. I was like, you know what? You're right. I actually do need to stop lusting after her like this. That's true. But it's like I still do anyway, and that's the whole point. So it was like, and then he smiled, and there was this loving interaction between us. So here's the point. It's like that basically, so my perversion now, my perverse, lustful, materialistic meditations, the pure version of that even continues on even into my relationship with Ayendra Prabhu in Goloka and his Manjari Svarupa and your other forms also. That continues on up there to where even then, even though at my original state my consciousness is pure regarding all this stuff, still the pastime-wise, I'm constantly being told all the time, hey, you should really stop lusting after her. You should really stop lusting after her. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't be lusting like this. Your consciousness should be pure. You're in Goloka. What are you doing? All of these things people are constantly saying to me, and this stuff is happening even in Goloka. So the point is, that's translating now into the conditioned version of that stuff happening also. So the point is, yes, I have my work to do to overcome this stuff. Believe me, I'm not going to just sit by and allow the lustful thoughts to remain lustful. But the point is, you get the idea that I'm trying to get across here. It's like the acharyas don't just randomly appear in dreams unless it's significant. And they don't just say stuff randomly here and there unless it's significant. And so Ayendra Prabhu, I know who he is eternally because he's described himself to us, his eternal desire. And because that's what he eternally desires, that's who he is. Because Krishna fulfills all desires. So the Svarupa, it consists of what you desire the most. So to the degree that you tap into your original Svarupa, that degree, you'll experience your original form, your original pastime, etc. Up to that point, you might even experience a branched off version of your main central Svarupa for a while, even in Goloka. And then you'll refine your meditations to your original full Svarupa then as well. So it's not necessarily that you'll go from here immediately to your original preference directly, instantly. You might go to your branch-off preference for a while to have a slightly different form activities with Krishna, still be in the transcendental, and then from there refine it further to go to Vrindavana. Or in Vrindavana, refining your form and then absorbing in a different set of pastimes. This stuff can happen too. It's not like, okay, you have to fully realize yourself 100% completely in order to make it back to the spiritual world at all. No, it's like you have to predominantly be absorbed in that consciousness, and then that's what Krishna will bring you back to, basically. Yes, thanks for taking part with us, Robin. Hare Krishna. I hope you rest well. Hare Krishna. And then, Nitai is there for us. Yes, he is. Nityananda, the Nityananda topic was definitely been long in the works. That is a topic that will be very important to cover soon, and which I will cover soon, for sure. Because Nityananda's glories are very important, or I should say consciousness of his glories are very important, even in the course of chanting the Mahamantra directly, and so many other things. Very important that people understand Nitai properly, and etc. So now the this whole thing about like entering new wombs. Basically, what do you do throughout your whole life? Okay, if you're in a condition in a male body, you're engaging in mostly, predominantly, or fighting against the desire, one or the other. You're either engaging in it or resisting engaging in it. Basically, sex activity. So in a male body, that means you have an erect pecker, which basically, once you die, once you leave a body, you end up developing another body, little baby body, to what? Grow another pecker to stick in the womb again once you come out of the womb. So it's it's just this cycle of growing new peckers to stick them in new wombs, to take new bodies, to grow new peckers for new wombs. It's just, this is how it is, man. So it's like, okay, do you want to actually break out of that cycle? and get back to the original womb, or the original place where you're not in a womb or stuck in a womb, that's the ideal place to be. Really, it is. And you say, I don't understand Natai at all, and that's why we ask for your mercy. Well, asking for Natai's mercy is very important, yes. Because the thing is, anybody claiming they understand Natai, nobody can really claim that specifically, technically speaking. And even if they did understand Natai, they wouldn't claim that out of humility or whatever. But what Natai has revealed to me, Nityananda, and what he's revealed to the devotees before us, and what they have kindly relayed to us, is that, and what he's revealed to you as well, I'm sure, Nitya Gauradasa, is that his form of pastimes and activities are very much so the forms, pastimes, and activities of the activities of Radha and Krishna in Goloka. And it's the most convenient by far to be devoted to Nityananda directly, and by doing so, one will see the forms, pastimes of Radha and Krishna, and be that much quicker united in their relationship with Radha and Krishna as well, and be inspired in the relationship with Nityananda eternally, and Nityananda as, of course, in his Goloka Svarupa, as Balarama, and as Ananga Manjari. So Ananga Manjari, Balarama, and Nityananda are all the same individual. We know this well from the scriptures and from the previous acharyas. And then when we glorify them, we see the others as well. So we see Balarama and Ananga Manjari when we glorify Nityananda, and vice versa. We see Nityananda when we glorify Balarama and Ananga Manjari, because they're all the same individual in different pastime streams, right? Transcendental pastime streams. So yes, this will be a very wonderful topic to cover soon, very soon. So on this, this one was especially covered for Robin's request, and Jagannath Das's request. He wanted me to cover this topic of the surrender thing as well. So yeah, basically, the whole point is this surrender is really about this connection feeling. It's really about this daily sensation of connection, like interacting with Radha and Krishna as if they're right there in front of you, which they are. And it's the whole point, like interacting with them very personally, like face to face, you know. And see, because the whole thing is, if we have the consciousness that Goloka and Radha and Krishna, Nityananda and Gauranga, and all of them, if we have this consciousness, they're all in a different world, different realm. We're here and then they're there. If we maintain that thinking process, it's going to be so difficult to actually interact with them and face-to-face get reciprocation from them, etc. It's going to be much more conducive to directly experience them face-to-face, daily basis, with us, in front of us, etc. Now, in the midst of that experiencing, we're naturally in the consciousness of asking them for their association, in the consciousness of desperation, attachment in separation, even in that face-to-face contact. It's not to be a consciousness of pridefulness that, oh, Krishna is interacting with me automatically. No, it's more like, I'm asking for your mercy, Krishna, please interact with me on a daily basis. And in that mood, in that consciousness, you're actually interacting with Krishna, you're seeing him. Just like Sri Radha is she gets so afraid of losing Krishna's association, Krishna is still standing in front of her, and she literally can't see him because she has so much affection for him. And this happens also with devotees she has affection for too, in certain cases as well, where the face-to-face contact is so intense and so appreciated, which it should be for us in our daily experience too, that in that appreciation process, that's when she stops seeing Krishna. The fear of separation actually makes her experience that she's separated from him when she's not. So this experience of the separation is a very powerful pastime, very powerful, very enlivening actually. And then you're saying, I don't know what to interact about, like ask them what they're doing today. Yes, exactly. Do ask them what they're doing today. Ask them which aspect of the pastimes they're absorbed in right now as you speak to them. Yes, do that. That's exactly what I do. And they reveal really interesting things too, because here's the amazing thing. The pastimes of Radha and Krishna, they go eternally in the cycle. They do the same pastimes every day, eternally, but there's infinite variety within those. But even amidst that variety, they branch off and engage in all sorts of different varieties that are catered to you individually in your relationship with them also. So it's not that those pastimes are really amazing and wonderful, yes, and worth being meditated on daily. because you can line them up with actually the time periods of our days, actually. So the Bhavanasara Sangraha, that book is very useful for this, and many other books like this. And yes, I'm aware of the translators, the people who are involved, they ended up straying away later, but originally them doing the service of translation, etc., was wonderful and an eternally valuable service, which we must never forget. And you're saying, I heard Sri Radha chants Hare Krishna to keep Krishna in front of her. That's also true. Yes, exactly. Because she is of the eternal consciousness of always afraid of Krishna being separated from her, which is exactly the consciousness we're supposed to have in our daily devotion. Always concerned that Radha and Krishna will be separated from us. So that healthy anxiety is actually a form of uplifting anxiety. Because within that anxiety, you don't actually experience temporal misery. You experience enlivenment. And yes, this can very much be experienced daily also. But yeah, that's the whole thing. And there's always new pastimes being created and manifest and made happen because of these interactions you have with Radha and Krishna. Now think about this for a second. This is very key. The Vrindavana mood is the mood of spontaneous interaction with Radha and Krishna on a personal, super personal level, where you're not focused on them being the supreme personality of Godhead or not. That's not your focus, and that's not even much of a second thought, to be honest with you, at the deepest levels of this absorption. But what that manifests as much more what people from other rasas would call casual interactions with Radha and Krishna. Well, they're deeply respectful and loving. They're not exactly casual in that sense, but they appear externally to be casual to many people. But the point is, they're heart bombs. Yes, likewise, my friend. Heart bombs to you as well. Hare Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. So yeah, and we're seeing this play out as well. Like you notice this. The devotees who are the Vrindavana devotees have a very much easier time with this. Where, okay, I'm interacting with Radha and Krishna on a daily basis. They're here. They're in front of me. I'm talking to them. They're with me, etc. And that's the Vrindavana mood. That's what you do as a Vrindavana devotee. You know. You still go about the regulations and make a point to actually worship them and stuff to set the proper example for others as best you can. But on your personal level, it's a free-flowing interaction between you and Krishna, on a personal level, at least, when you're a Vrindavana devotee. If you're a devotee of a different place or preference, Dvaraka, Vaikuntha, or whatever, you're much more going to be fixated on going about your devotion in a very specific way, where it's like, okay, Radha and Krishna, when and if they decide to reciprocate, they will. In the meantime, I'll just keep chanting. I'll just keep doing. I'll just do this, this, and this. And then if they decide to reciprocate, they'll reciprocate. Whereas the Vrindavana mood is like, Krishna, you're here. I'm interacting with you. That's what's happening. You know, it's a different way of seeing it. It's a different way of experiencing these things, very distinctly so. And you can very much get attuned to what your eternal realm preference is by how you feel comfortable going about your devotion to Radha and Krishna daily. And see, and here's another thing regarding the imagination stuff too, and mental speculation. Vrindavana devotees also see it uniquely in a different way from other devotees. We see it in the perspective of, okay, yes, I understand that I have imaginative speculations, which are materially conditioned things, but I also understand that Radha and Krishna are with me, communicating with me past those things and trying to talk to me. And I'm trying to pay attention to what they're trying to tell me through the fog of my imaginatory thoughts towards them. That's how Vrindavana devotees think about it. Devotees of other realms tend to look at it like, okay, this is just period my temporal illusion only, and I have to get past this, and then Radha and Krishna will reciprocate once I, of my own accord, get past all this first. So it's really very much so a different, and okay, they might reciprocate in the midst of it if they're pleased to do so. It's a different, it's a different pastime stream absorption, right? He said, is it bad to be overambitious, or what is being overambitious? There's no such thing as overambitious. Literally, what you're the most ambitious for is what you eternally have. And I really cannot emphasize this point enough. In fact, this is probably the main aspect of my preaching and my talking and about this stuff that devotees are not liking. And I'm not saying, what I'm saying is many groups of devotees are not liking this preaching of mine, saying that, okay, what you eternally desire is what you eternally have, and that's why you want it, etc. And the reason for that is simply because many of them are in the Dvaraka and Vaikuntha modes of thinking about this stuff, which are also legitimate transcendental ways of thinking, yes, but different ways of thinking transcendentally. Different. It's not that somebody's right and somebody's wrong. It's just there's your original core state, and then there's your various transcendental conditioned states, which are also real, but they're still transcendentally conditioned, and it's the point, beyond material conditioning. So, so the Vrindavana mood and consciousness allows the individual to really pick up on what Radha and Krishna are trying to tell you, what they're wanting to happen, wanting to see, and then you can make actual, very educated choices based on this in a way that you remain constantly enlivened, okay, on a daily basis, no matter what's happening around you. And that constant enlivenment, which happens, remains even in the midst of challenges, difficulties during the day, interacting with other people, etc. Welcome, Ugeshwari Markandan Naidu. Glad to have you with us tonight. And let's see, when see things related to the Lord, it's real but not speculation. Well, that's the thing. When you see things related to Krishna, so here's the thing, the devotee never assumes that what they're seeing or thinking is fully transcendental. Okay, we always assume on our ends that we're more or less conditioned, but we see it that Radha and Krishna are all merciful, and on their ends, coming towards us, trying to interact with us, they're being merciful and allowing us to see them through our conditioning and our illusion, etc. It's not that okay, we see it, okay, this is only my speculation, and them over there, this is their reciprocation. It's like two completely separate things. You see it, you see them happening together. Okay, I'm speculating here. They're trying to interact with me and give me the real information here, but they're also coming through my speculation too to reveal to me certain tidbits and points about them, about my relationship with them that I need to know, pick up on, and things to tell me and enliven me in, etc. So it's a very mature way to looking at it, actually, in a very healthy way to look at it. But like I said, you can actually test this for yourself. If you're of the Vaikuntha mood or consciousness, or the Dvaraka mood of consciousness, serving Krishna, you'll be very much of a mindset of my speculations here on one side, and then their reciprocations on the other side here. So it's like it's either speculation or direct reciprocation, or it's actually both at the same time. Now, you looking at it like that is simply a symptom of, or I should say, I'm saying if a devotee looks at it like that, it's simply a symptom of their Dvaraka mood. It's not like, it's not something to guilt trip devotees about or wrong. It's just that symptom, that's all, of their internal mood, basically. And once again, the devotees' different moods, they will see other devotees from different perspectives. Like the Vrindavana devotees, we see the Vaikuntha and Dvaraka moods as being like kind of stiff. We see them as being very stiff moods overall. Stiff types of consciousness that just are really restrictive. We see them that way a lot. Whereas the Dvaraka devotees and the Vaikuntha devotees, they see it where, okay, this is actually very respectful and healthy and loving and good and more respectful. Whereas the Vrindavana devotees, okay, they're spontaneous, but they're not as respectful. It's like there's a different way that devotees with different eternal moods, preferences, see things in terms of how Krishna is interacted with. So, is this kind of devotees in Dvaraka Mathura mood? It all depends on the individual. So Prabhupada wrote his books to facilitate all moods, but if a devotee is, but I would say predominantly speaking, as a whole, yes, most devotees in ISKCON are of the Dvaraka mood towards Krishna, or the Mathura mood. Basically, the Mathura mood is like halfway between the Dvaraka and Vrindavana moods, where it's like, okay, you really more strongly appreciate the spontaneous interactions with Krishna, but him being God is still an important factor. It's not as important as it was in Dvaraka. So in Dvaraka, Krishna being the Supreme Personality of God, it is first. Him interacting with you personally in an affectionate way is like secondary to him being the personality of Godhead. Like, okay, it's like, so the affection is important to you, the face-to-face relationship, but him being God is the most important thing, basically, at the center of Dvaraka consciousness. Okay, he's God, he's interacting with me intimately, even though he's God. That's the mindset. Mathura, it's like, okay, interacting with him intimately is more important than him being God. Him being God isn't the biggest, most important thing, but it's still a thing that is important still in the Mathura mood, basically. So he is God, it's still important, but what's more important to us is the intimate interactions with him, more so than him being God, basically, is the Mathura mood. And the Vrindavana mood is where him being God at all, it doesn't make any difference at all to you. It's like, whatever. Krishna, we love you, Krishna, period. Whether you're the Supreme Personality of God or not, we love you, and our focus is intimate and direct and affectionate. See, that's the difference in the three. So that right there can tell you that the vast majority of devotees in ISKCON do have the Dvaraka mood towards Krishna, or the Mathura mood towards Krishna. And like that's just the fact. It's just the fact of the matter. So Prabhupada internally is in the Vrindavana mood, but when he's going about preaching, see, here's the thing. In preaching, so even when I'm preaching and stuff and talking, the preaching is always in the Dvaraka mood. So Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, etc. So preaching, scriptural writing, translations, stuff that ends up on paper is always done in the Dvaraka consciousness. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna in his two-armed form and two-legged form as the original Vasudeva, from whom the next Vasudeva expands. That is how preaching is done, period, in anywhere in the material worlds, etc. The Vrindavana mood and the Mathura mood and stuff, that's an internal individual thing for each individual, right? Some individuals may have that mood, some may not. But the preaching itself always remains in a way which caters to the Dvaraka mood also, because preaching has to apply to all moods as well, simultaneously, including even up to the Vaikuntha mood as well. But in our Sampradaya, we extend that to Krishna and Dvaraka, instead of dealing with, or separately needing to go into the Vaikuntha stuff, because we're worshiping Krishna in this two-armed original form specifically, and not his expanded four-armed Vishnu forms. Or I should say we are, but we eternally see them as his expanded forms, which they are. And so we understand that Krishna doesn't need a separate Vaikuntha, etc., to enact those things. He does all that also within his Vasudeva form, two-armed form. Okay. So yeah, feel free to keep chiming in, my friends, and keep talking. It's pretty much discussion mode at this point, conversation instead of presentation. So yeah, what more do you have to say, my friends? Is it okay to call out deviants or offensive to judge? This is actually a really good thing that you're bringing this up, because naturally all of us, we feel this gut-wrenching, horrific feeling, even when we call out legitimate deviants, or I should say people who are legitimately deviating. It's not that there's no such thing as somebody being a deviant or like that, because the living entity isn't deviant. The living entity is pure. But someone choosing to deviate in terms of external behavior, that's fine to call that out, yes. But the thing is, here's the thing. When we call these things out, we need to only be calling out the actual set of behaviors and what the actual points of deviation are, not actually attacking the individual themselves on a personal level. Like you personally are this or that. Like if we were and have the consciousness while we're calling them out of actually feeling affection for them and actually trying to relate with them first off and uplift them in a way that is helpful, right? And so, but also it doesn't always work 100%. Sometimes it's just you eternally have a different relationship with Krishna than somebody else does, and that is so intense that it manifests in both of your conditionings that you just, no matter what, can't get along. Even if you're both technically right about something, you just can never agree or whatever, or you just can never actually get on the same page. You know what I'm saying? So what is offensive is to actually get into a mode where you find pleasure in calling out. So if you find yourself finding pleasure in calling out deviations, then that's a bad sign. Because I don't find pleasure in calling out. I'd prefer never doing that, actually. I would prefer spending all my time never even discussing those things, ever. But it just, oftentimes it comes to a point where in our lives where we just have to call out what we see is erroneous and deviant in terms of, now there's two types of deviation. There's behavioral deviations, okay, which are one thing, they're one topic, and then there's philosophical point deviations, which are a different thing. They're two separate things. So, for example, behaviorally, I deviate quite often on a very consistent basis, and I call myself out on it, and others call me out on it too, and that's fine. But I make a point not to philosophically deviate on anything. So, and if others see some philosophical deviation, that's fine if they mention it, if they can verify it is a deviation, how and in what way. And if their point that they're calling out is actually uplifting on the core level to the soul of the devotee or the individual. It's the upliftment factor is that there or is it not there, basically. So all of these things are very important to understand, because what is happening, and then you say, because even if a person is wrong to us, he might be right for an atai. Exactly. So here's the thing. When we call stuff out, we're simply calling out the standardized principles on paper. basically the verifiable principles, both philosophically and behaviorally, that are verified as provable, just like with the music encodings, those things which are provable as verifiably pure devotional activities. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with calling those things out if somebody is blatantly like disregarding them or not behaving properly or whatever. And then you're saying, Kakadis, sometimes I see things in discount tables that just make want to go in and flip tables like Jesus. Exactly. Yes. So the money changing, turning my father's house into a marketplace, all of this stuff was what Yeshua noticed. Yeshua, Jesus. He noticed this back in the days when he was around. And yes, I know that the Bible's been tampered with since then. He got turned into an astrotheological figure, yada yada. But the historical, actual Yeshua, whoever he actually was at that point in time, he actually, the principle here is the same. So him flipping the tables, the only single time he showed anger and got physically aggressive in the entire history that we know of is when the money tables were there. Now, this is extremely significant, where basically they were turning the temples into places of gathering money for themselves. So the Pharisees and the priests working there, they were turning the temples into money exchange centers, okay? Which is what Judaism actually has become in most cases. Most forms of Judaism have warped and twisted from what they were supposed to be, which is what Yeshua was trying to bring up. He was saying, hey, your original practices were supposed to be getting you towards devotional service to God, right? And because you deviated from these principles, you forgot the purpose of these animal sacrifices and all these regulations and stuff, and you basically started to get a wrong assumption that all of this has to do with your temporal gain, your bodily benefit, and you've turned it all into this astrotheological cult stuff now, in connection with the Phoenicians and other groups that were doing this. He says, you guys have deviated from this. So he was knocking over these tables physically, just dumping over the money all over the place, showing that, hey, this is so... He was saying that is more offensive to Krishna than anything else. Turning his temples into business centers, okay? Turning his sacred places into places where money is generated, as the focus of the individuals in that location doing it. You notice everything else, he talked very calmly, and he basically explained things in a very reasonable, laid-back manner. Every other case except this case. It's because they were the ones actually using the scriptures to mislead people, and that is what he showed fury towards. So when we're calling out deviations in others philosophically, we have to be calling out what the deviations are, and we have to be making a point that, hey, this deviation is causing people to feel depression on a subconscious level. It's actually causing harm to devotees on subconscious levels, or directly in physical levels, etc. as well. So, and to say we're calling it out because people are being harmed by this, and this is misleading people, specifically misleading them, instead of just being some innocent, okay, I don't know what's going on, I don't know one way or the other about Krishna consciousness, blah, 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 then actually misleading people directly. Like, okay, we're teaching this, and then that's actually not what the actual truth is. And then you say, there's a quote, Prabhupada completely destroying their philosophy of religion, caused conflict. Prabhupada says rascals are against religion. Yeah, and he used the word religion in various contexts and stuff too. He said, okay, Krishna consciousness is beyond religion, but in that particular context, he's talking about man-made concocted religions causing conflict. And he says that rascals are against the real religion, the original true Sanatana Dharma, Krishna's establishment, basically, which uplifts everyone individually. And so, yeah, I've gone into many cases. What really did infuriate me a lot, actually, was I would notice this trend when I was in the temple here. And I'm mentioning this for reference, so use this to your upliftment and to inspire your devotion to Krishna in the more pure forms, you know. But what I would notice was there was these guys having conversations immediately after the artis would end, the chanting would end. They would immediately start talking about their business. Okay, so what do you do? What do you do for a living? How do you make money? Blah blah blah. It's just, and then it would just be a whole conversation about business. When it's like, okay, this is the one day of the week we're all actually in the temple, sitting down, interacting with each other. It's like, for crying out loud, can we at least here talk about Radha and Krishna specifically, their pastimes, their glories, outside of just the class time itself? Please, at least in the temple, let's talk about Radha and Krishna's glories and how that's related to how business works and how monetary things work, but as it's related to them, not some independent thing. Okay, I do this for a living, and this is like a separate topic from my devotion to Radha. Not like that. But I saw this happening a lot, though. Like even the temple leader and stuff, and it was just, it would immediately shift to this money conversation. And I was like, that's the issue. That's exactly why there's this interpersonal like frustration. Temple leaders always have this like bitter mood or angry mood or whatever like that. You know, it's because of that consciousness of separating Radha and Krishna from your daily activities in life. Basically, it's like, okay, my daily activities are here, Radha and Krishna are out there, over there. My devotion here will get me there. That whole consciousness leads to a lot of angry stuff. Like, and it leads to a lot of that just focus more on actual money and business and things, you know? So, this is really intriguing today, actually, and maybe you guys can find this out more. But yeah, Radha and Krishna's faces, they've been gradually happier like throughout the day. I noticed they were really happy early in the morning, and then like midday or sometime there was like this really intense concern coming from them. And then now, yeah, they're going back to their like relaxed mood again. It's very, very interesting, actually. I'm still trying to pinpoint. I feel like I did or said or thought something towards some devotee or something that was like unkind or hurt their feelings or something. And I think that's what was going on. But which of course I feel horrible about. But I need to. So yeah, if you guys can maybe give me some pointers on what that might be. I think I have the general idea what it is, and I'm making a point not to repeat that stuff in terms of my internal thoughts and actions, and translate it into external actions, etc. But we'll see. We'll see. They always make things work out for the better, and that's the truth. So whatever it is, we'll find out soon enough. And they'll always get me through, basically. See, and here's the beautiful thing with Radha, if you keep in connection with them like this, they will let you know what the mistakes are that you might be making in your thoughts, in your daily actions, in your feelings towards others, how you're going about your day. They'll let you know what the areas you can correct and work on and stuff. They won't leave you in the dust, and this is the whole point. I think that's probably what it was. I think even though obviously my intention isn't to find faults, probably subconsciously I was finding faults in others without even necessarily knowing I was doing that, and that's what they want me to actually pay attention to more, and specifically not do any of that at all, which is good. I really shouldn't be doing that, and that's true, which is a good thing. So, but I always find it something specific. I always run into it as being something very particular. But yeah, but it's nice. I'm gradually feeling better about it, more relaxed, more relieved. But the point is, yes, you'll notice this. Like so it's not a situation where you're going to be in fear of being like left in the dust, and where they won't tell you or they won't inform you of what's going on, or like what it is that you've done off, or that's awry or whatever. They'll immediately like bring you back on track and help you make corrections as needed. Because they love us, you know, that's the whole thing. They're eternally loving parents. So, so I am listening, and I know you guys are listening as well. Because the thing is, as devotees, we are listening to Radha and Krishna. We're wanting to pay attention to what they're trying to tell us and what they're trying to indicate to us, and then we make choices based on that understanding with them on a daily basis. But you'll notice, though, if someone gets into the consciousness, they get really absorbed in like this criticism and fault finding and stuff. It can literally become an entire philosophical and interpersonal worldview altogether, to where they won't be able to actually pick up or register when Radha and Krishna are telling them to stop doing this or to treat other devotees kindly and love them and stuff. They won't register those things from Radha and Krishna at all. And that will descend an individual into a very dark asuric state after death if they maintain that until the time of death. So it's very dangerous to get into that mindset, and you'll run into this amongst the many of the Ritvik groups. They get so absorbed in this criticizing and so absorbed in this fixating on the wrongs and finding the faults in what others are doing and stuff that. So here's the thing. I look at it like this. And this is how we the Vrindavana devotees see it. It's like, even if somebody is actually deviating, even if somebody is in the wrong, and even if somebody is actually harming others and misleading others as a devotee or whatever, still we need to bring our consciousness back out of the criticizing consciousness into a completely loving and affectionate consciousness towards them immediately and as quickly as possible. Even if there's a necessity to call out their deviations or whatever, we still need to bring ourselves back. And this is the whole point. It's like, we may not technically on paper be in the wrong, but the point is we have to get back to our original consciousness towards them as quickly as possible. So we may on paper be right in terms of, okay, we're calling out a deviation that is a deviation, and in principle we may be correct, but we still have to actually, but we're not correct in our hearts or consciousness by being in that mode though. And this is the whole point. It may be like a necessity, just like it's sometimes necessary to go to war and fight people and to slay them on the battlefield. It's never a good thing in and of itself, or like the actual killing process is a very horrific thing that one has to purify their consciousness from all the anger and aggression. It's like, just like the Pandavas, they purified themselves as a principle, as a routine, even after the Kurukshetra, which was a sacred battle instructed by Krishna. But Kurukshetra is a very good point, a very perfect illustration of this, because it's like, even if someone, it's to the point where they actually have to be slain, what to speak of called out and constructively criticized or whatever. If somebody has to actually be slain, for crying out loud, we still need to purify ourselves from that even. Like Indra had to purify himself from slaying Vritrasura, because Vritrasura was both pure devotee and a Brahmana, even though technically speaking, on paper, and in general standard principle, him killing Vritrasura was not sinful because they were fighting as Kshatriyas on the battlefield. So, but the point is, his internal consciousness had to still be purified of that activity. And this is what Prabhupada says, very importantly and very emphatically, that even Parashurama sets this example, that even though killing is sometimes and even often necessary in Kali Yuga to get rid of the demonic and stuff, it's never a good thing in and of itself, the process. It's never the ideal situation, and it's never the directly desired situation of any devotee at all, basically, where let's slay them as the first choice or option, without first trying to figure out some peaceable means to sort it out, basically. You always go the sort out method first, and if that fails, then you fight, basically. And then you say, a lot of good points, actually, you're bringing up. When doing something and getting hurt mean that a bigger reaction was dogged. Yes, like that. And when doing something, how can we not focus on the flickering of the eyes, like right and left eye flickering mean? You may have to re-ask that one. I think I know what you mean, but let's see. I think finding faults gets their faults on us, like taking other sins. Yes, exactly. That part, that's how it works. You're talking about like when your left and right eyes are flickering on you, I would assume, and that's how that's indicating auspiciousness or inauspiciousness. Yes, so the point is, as a devotee, everything is auspicious, transcendental, beyond temporally auspicious or quote-unquote inauspicious, right? And that's the case with the left and right eyes twinkling. So consider even things that are generally considered inauspicious, consider auspicious from Radha and Krishna. So here's the thing with this is really interesting, actually. The way Radha and Krishna interact with me is they're like super, super merciful, gentle, and kind, and they're, I'd say, at over 99% of the time, almost. Well, at least probably 95% of the time. They're always like really happy, like in their mood and laid back and calm and relaxed. Sometimes they express angry features or frustration or fury, but it's always a loving, concerned fury and frustration. It's never a fury or an anger which is like a punishment, like you need to be punished mindset. It's more like, I'm really concerned this is happening to you. I really want your consciousness to flow back to what it was, and for you to be happy and treating others with full love and affection again. So even then, even when they express like angry or what quote unquote angry, they're still affectionate and loving and smiling, but their features, and I'm actually looking at their murti right now, that's why I keep looking off, but their features are specifically in that way to let me know that, okay, you're thinking or doing something that is a bit off basis here. You're going in the direction of being unkind to others, and it's just not necessary. So please come back to your happy consciousness and your loving consciousness that flows between us, basically. And that's how they bring me back when I start getting, and usually I start getting like aggressive or angry mostly, and I'm not saying it's the right thing, but I'm saying usually because of feelings of extreme isolation and ostracism and constant bombardment of oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that, just over and over and over and over again. So it's almost kind of like a lashback type mode sometimes, you know what I mean? But even then, it's not good to be in that consciousness. It's good to correct that, for sure. You say yes, and then you say inauspiciousness takes us to Nitai, and auspiciousness takes us away. Well, I think, they auspiciousness. Well, the thing is, you'll go to Nitai both ways if your consciousness is in the right. So inauspiciousness and auspiciousness will both take you to Nitai. Both will, because he's all merciful. I wish I got to see Radhika instead. Well, there's no instead, my friend. Seeing Nitai Gora means you will be seeing Radha and Krishna, and vice versa. I always laugh when I see that stuff. I mean, it's just, I understand what you're saying, but it's just always remember that there's no like Nitai Gora over here and Radha Krishna over here and one or the other. No, they're always together, always. There's never a situation where it's just only Nitai Gora and not Radha Krishna, or vice versa, only Radha Krishna and not Nitai Gora. They're always together, on spontaneous pastime streams, or I should say simultaneous pastime streams, intertwined together. So yes, it's never a Nitai Gora thing versus a Radha Krishna thing, or vice versa. No, it's always together, balled up together. When you have one, you have the other, vice versa. So I feel that I messed up the whole time. Well, here's the thing that Tigor does. Radha and Krishna understand that we as devotees are trying to advance. Okay, they understand, right? They understand that we're trying to get back to them and do our best. So they don't want you to be completely absorbed in the consciousness of always thinking you messed up continually. They want you to be absorbed in that consciousness to the degree that it enlivens you in your devotional service. Okay, that you feel enlivened and inspired in their reciprocation and their affection for you. They want you to register their affection for you when you're feeling those things, okay? So this is the point. They don't want you to actually feel like depressed. Like, they don't want you to feel in the consciousness of you did something wrong, therefore I'm punishing you because you did something wrong. It's more like you did something wrong. In spite of that, I still love you, love and affection. So therefore, please yourself get back to this consciousness toward us also, and your other friends who are other living entities as well. So basically, come back to the consciousness that you have towards us and others, your loving consciousness. Come back to this consciousness, please. That's what they're asking us to do. It's not like, okay, because here's the thing. Our consciousness is trying to do better and actually trying to improve and to ask for forgiveness and to try and to try and love devotees and not actually mistreat them or have nice angry thoughts towards them. So it's like this. They know that, so therefore we have to actually sincerely mean that, though. And then when they get that mood, or when they arrange things in their lives where things start to become difficult, or we feel bogged down or something, it's simply their message. Please come back to your original consciousness, and please recognize the unconditional affection we have for you, that you also have towards us. Tap into this again. See, that's what they're trying to say to us. But if you find you're getting like into this consciousness of like, oh, I messed up, that's all I ever do is mess up, and that you're like in this spiral loop thinking of all you ever do is mess up, and you're always depressed about it, and like you literally think you can never do anything right in your consciousness. If those thoughts aren't specifically related to feeling grateful towards Radha and Krishna and uplifted while you're thinking those thoughts, then those thoughts are actually more on the materialistic line of thinking. If you're thinking those things in actual humility and you're actually feeling grateful towards Radha and Krishna and feeling their love and affection enlivening you, and that's translating as those thoughts, I never do anything right, etc., then that's pure devotional consciousness. But it's you can tell based on the internal symptoms you're experiencing when you're having those types of thoughts. Oh yes, how to be more confident then. Yes, exactly. Confidence is very important in devotional service. Not cockiness, not false ego, but solid confidence in the sense of, okay, you're assured in their loving affection for you. Okay, you're assured in their unconditional affection, and you're confident that they have that affection for you, and that will remain there no matter what happens, or how they display that affection in observable ways. You see what I'm saying? Because like all today, it's been killing me. I feel like I did something horrifically bad or wrong, and then Radha and Krishna, they're still they're getting back to it, but they're still, because they know that I'm like contemplating it, they're still like getting back to getting ready to fully reveal to me exactly what it is, how I thought, etc., so that I can make amends for it, basically. So, but it's getting there. It's a gradual process, though. So But the point is that they have emotions and feelings too. So, and this is the thing. It's not exactly, and don't always look at it like this. If Radha and Krishna are expressing like sadness or anger or something on any given day, a lot of times they just may be experiencing that as an emotion that they're going through. Like in general, it may not actually necessarily always be related to something you did or didn't do wrong or right or whatever. It's just maybe a matter of there's something really deep in their own consciousness that they're facing because they're eternal personalities. So just like we contemplate things as individual persons, and we have desires and things like this. Well, here's the thing. I understand what you're saying, my friend, on that one. I think it's Natai. I do try to think of Natai too. But the point is, I've been making a very strong point actually daily and feeling very enlivened, and I've been talking to Nityananda a lot more, and specifically focusing on appreciating him so much more. Actually, that is what I've been doing, or making a point to do. So I understand what you're meaning there. Definitely, I'll be glorifying him more for sure. But the thing is, I know there is something other than that also specifically. I definitely have not been avoiding Natai or anything like that, or trying to sideline him. No way. It's just a matter of, but yeah, that's the point. Because the personalities, they go through mood fluctuations and changes too. So like Krishna may be feeling, but every mood that they go through is in a transcendent blissful state though. So their happiness, their sadness, their anger is all blissful and all loving. Even it's in the midst of those emotions. So like even when Radha and Krishna have the most angry faces that they could ever muster or display, they're still smiling, and you still see a smile exuding from their face even amidst that fury and frustration, you see? Because it's a loving fury and frustration. It's not a inimical. It's not an inimical fury or frustration. So it's very interesting. It's just well, but what I do know is this. I needed to go through today this feeling of like dread and gut horror and all this other stuff, that I did something wrong, so that I won't do it again, and so that I will make amends from here on out, and so that I will actually have empathy for what it is that I caused in others that was painful. You see what I mean? So yeah. So I can tell that that's part of it too. So I'm grateful for that, and I personally feel really uplifted and happy. It's just I feel like I've harmed another devotee or devotees in some way, unintentionally or not knowingly or whatever. And of course, that's them talking to me through the super soul, within the heart of the super soul, actually. So, yes. Does anyone else have anything to chime in as well? It looks like there's 4 viewers right now on. Feel free to bring anything up. Almost at the 2-hour mark at this point, but yeah, I'll probably wrap it up in just a few minutes. But let's see, I completely lost it with Nitai after finding out we can one-pointedly glorify Nitai Gauranga. Yes, you can, actually. You can. And that's the thing. If someone chooses to one-pointedly glorify Nitai Gauranga, they'll definitely have my full support in doing so. For sure. Definitely, for sure. Especially now with the new information I have on those. I have those all the time. And that's a good thing. And then, of course, others may choose of their own accord to specifically glorify Radha Krishna and Nitai Gauranga as well, where they don't only do Nitai Gauranga. Now, that's a personal preference thing too. And then others may kind of lean towards the Radha Krishna emphasis as well. None of the three are wrong in any way. That's very true. It's a very important fact. It's just that I tend to be the ones that I like to focus on both at the same time, like Radha Krishna and Nitai Gauranga together. Yeah. That tends to be my personal preference. Just Nitai, I meant. Yeah, and you can do that with Nitai too. And, obviously that's where your heart is leading you to do that in that way. But there's the thing. We can't impose on any other devotee like what our personal inclination towards Radha Krishna or Nitai Gauranga is. That's basically up to them individually to decide. We're also not in a position to tell other devotees, okay, you shouldn't be doing this, or you shouldn't be, regarding those things, regarding their internal moods or relationships and stuff. Now, like me expressing my opinions toward the Dvaraka mood and all this other stuff, it's basically me expressing my feelings towards the topic, but it's not I can't say that somebody's wrong or right or whatever. It's just a matter of how they feel towards Krishna. And that's up to them. That's between them and Krishna, naturally. So, yeah, no individual can interfere with any other individual's individuality. That is eternally unique to those individuals. And, yeah, so this has been a really fun night. I've enjoyed this topic, and I have some interesting plans for next week. Some ideas we can pick up on. Oh, and in the meantime, I'll bid you all a fond evening. I hope this conversation was uplifting and helpful, and wish you all the best. Hare Krishna and Hare Bol. Toodaloo.